in Bihar. Fortisganj is in a very small district, not geographically but marginally. It's been a marginalized district for a long time called ADRI, which was earlier part of the Purnia district on the border of India and Nepal. I was raised and went to school in Calcutta, and now I spent my time between New York and Fortisganj in Bihar. In New York, I spent 8 months teaching at New York University. I'm a professor there at the School for Continuing Professional Studies, and I teach students for a Masters of Science in Global Affairs. And my main course is on human trafficking as gender-based violence. And in India, 15 years ago, I founded an NGO called Apne Women Worldwide, which works against sex trafficking. We organize women and girls in red light districts and among denotified criminal tribes who were formerly nomadic groups that were labeled as criminals under British colonialism and so marginalized consequently that now they have ended up with intergenerational prostitution, where girls are forced to end up in prostitution, often by their own family members, and their fathers and their husbands are forced to become pimps for their own wives and sisters. And homes are often the brothels. And this is particular to certain caste communities, like the Nuts, Bhegia, Sasis, and Kanjars. And that is the group we are trying to organize in Araria for the last 15 years. And also to bring to attention at the policy level, at the UN, in Delhi, issues concerning the person who I call the last girl, who is taking off from John Ruskin's concept of the last unto the last, Gandhiji's concept of uplift of the last, Antyodaya, and Ambedkar's concept of Antyaja, untouched, the last born. So we talk about this last girl who is the most vulnerable of all human beings we know, because not only is she female and poor, but she's often low caste, and not only she's female, poor and low caste, but she's also a teenager, and therefore she's not allowed to take any decision for herself over her life or her body. So we try to reach this last girl as we continue our work. And so today I'm really honored and privileged to be chairing a panel who are doing the work that I so firmly believe in the state that I hold dearest to my heart. So I'm really pleased that we are doing this, and very recently I have also been appointed a distinguished scholar at the University of California, Berkeley. And the reason I'm mentioning that is that for many of my panelists and those in the room, I want to announce that the Center for Race and Gender in the University of California, Berkeley has just launched an archive project called the Legacies of Conflict from South Asia. And under that, the work that I've done for the last 30 years and the work of many human rights defenders is being archived. And the physical archives will be kept at Columbia University, digitally at Berkeley, and Stanford will be doing the e-curation. So there are possibilities for women's work to be archived and presented and disseminated. And so I just wanted to announce that if anyone is interested in that project. I'm going to use my 10 minutes to speak at the end of everyone's presentations before I open up the floor for questions. Each speaker will be speaking for 12 minutes, as you know by now, and then we will try to give 25 minutes for question and answers. I'll start by introducing all my panelists. I have with me Kalpana, who's a lecturer at the Birkbeck University of London, and she is from the Department of Geography, Environment and Development. Her research interests are interdisciplinary, and she's been working on agrarian change in Bihar. So she is our first speaker, and I will introduce each speaker as they present.
Why don't you come and sit here?
thanking the whole team at ADRI for organizing this really important and exciting event. And I wanted to specially mention Katinka Karkov, who many of us are missing because she hasn't been able to actually be present, although she's a very key person in bringing all of this together. Okay, so I'm going to keep it brief as I've been asked, and so if there's any connections which I'm missing, then please do let me know in the discussion. So the work I'm going to be talking about is some new research which I've just started, but it draws on my earlier work on women agricultural laborers organizing in Bihar. And another strand of my work, relatedly, which looks at how we can theorize this emergence and almost ubiquitous now invocation of the notion of gender equality in neoliberal development policies. So the work I'm doing at the moment, more broadly, focuses on the mobilization of unpaid and underpaid women's labor within social policies which have basically been designed to target and try to mitigate some of the worst effects of liberalized markets. And I suggest here that what I'm looking at is whether this really is producing, in fact, new forms of gendered precarious labor. And I'm looking in particular at the midday meal scheme in Bihar. So just to give you an idea about the way gender equality is being used at the moment, particularly in international development. It's epitomized by the slogan of the World Bank, which has been in use since 2007, gender equality and smart economics. And you know, when looking for a quote which really epitomizes this, I in fact found what Nitish Kumar said when introducing his women's empowerment policy in 2015, which is we need to bring the marginalized section of society to the mainstream, and he's referring to women here. We cannot develop till their productivity is harnessed. So really it's this idea of mobilizing women's labor. That is really the core of what they're talking about when they actually use the term gender equality. And so I've been looking at how this notion of gender equality, which can somehow be harnessed for economic growth, depends on intensifying and extending women's labor. And this is for two reasons. One is, of course, the shifting of responsibility for survival onto women in low-income households at a point when they're pushed to the edge of survival by economic liberalization and so on. And in this context, you get the notions of empowerment and participation being invoked. And the other aspect is, of course, the fact that women are still seen as an untapped resource. So the further incorporation of women into global labor markets, into global value chains, including increasingly through microfinance, is seen as an important source for sustaining and expanding profits. And in this kind of approach, women are basically seen as having an almost infinite capacity for more and more work. And this we see across development institutions. In the Indian context, of course, it also intersects with specific ideas about class and caste, as well as about gender. So, for example, recently I was reading a report which was commissioned by the government of Ruchira, which was looking into the conditions faced by landless agricultural labor women in two districts. And the report found that these women, when you counted their waged work as well as their their domestic work, were working up to around 14 to 16 hours a day. And in the peak season, it was more than that. But when it came to making recommendations, the report recommended that these women should be given income-generating activities to do in their leisure time. Okay? And it even kind of expressed concern that currently these women were using their leisure time unproductively. So they were apparently playing cards, watching television, gossiping, and even sleeping, right? So what I suggest is that this approach is not really about challenging unequal gender relations. It's not even about instrumentalizing gender equality. It's actually about using inequality as a resource. So, we've seen from data from across the world that women often work harder, they're more reliable borrowers, and they spend, in particular, more of their income on households and particularly on their children than men do. But rather than just taking this as something natural and given, we need to ask why this is. Look at the impacts of a variety of patriarchal ideologies around what makes someone a good mother and so on, and also material structures of inequality, women's lack of mobility, their lack of access to resources and so on. And the other thing which I found about this is that in contexts where women do organize collectively in movements with a transformational agenda, like in the case of women agricultural laborers in the 90s in Bihar, a lot of these things come to be challenged, although that's a very broad process. So the questions start being asked by these women about why they don't have access to public space, about why they don't have time, why they are solely responsible for childcare, why they can't, for example, attend political meetings when men do, and so on. So moving on to the work which I'm doing now, it's with midday meal workers, so school cooks basically, in Bihar, and looking at how they've organized. And I won't go into, one of the speakers this morning in this room talked about the midday meal scheme. It employs a majority of women workers. And clearly, given factors which we're going to hear about later, like the feminization of agriculture and responsibility, the program provides a potentially valuable source of income. But what I suggest is that the midday meal program, firstly, it structurally reproduces conditions of insecurity, precarity, and underemployment, with an absence of the basic protections which other state employees receive. And secondly, what people experience as school cooks in the midday meal scheme basically reproduces caste and gender-based relationships which are characterized by violence and coercion. And this is really how subordination and precarity is maintained. So if we consider midday meal work as feminized work, both in the sense of being done majority by women, but also in the sense that it is very low paid, very irregularly paid, often after 5 or 6 months. It's part-time in the sense that the scheme is visualized, women will only work 3 hours a day, but in fact, as with most part-time work, it's actually much longer and up to 6 or 7 hours a day. Most importantly, perhaps, these workers are defined not as workers, but as volunteers, and they're paid not a salary or a wage, but an honorarium. So within this, you have the very gendered construction of midday meal workers as basically altruistic carers who are therefore not the subject of rights. And this is a quote from the midday meal scheme director when he was speaking to a delegation of workers from the Bihar Rasoya South, which is their organization. And he says to them, the school is like your family, these are like your own children. Looking after them is your duty. What is all this about being government employees? Because that was their demand at that point. Not only this, but what I've found is that the kind of relationships which we find both in agricultural wage labor carried out by women as well as private domestic work carried out by women. Relations which are between dominant caste landed employers and subject and oppressed caste workers, and which are highly personalized, and where the tasks and obligations are elastic and not very well defined. This is actually reproduced in the relationships between these workers in this government scheme, the midday meal scheme, and the teachers in the school. So midday meal workers explain how they're asked to do additional work like cleaning the schools, cleaning the drains, cleaning the teachers' houses, and even on occasion being asked to work on the teachers' land. Not only this, but labor relations are enforced through a lot of coercion, including being accused of stealing, constant threats of dismissal, and also violence. And unfortunately, we don't have time. These are some examples of incidents to kind of demonstrate this. But I will show you these examples, which is really another aspect of this, which is when workers do demand their rights, it's countered with particular kinds of gendered violence and harassment. So here, Sohela from Siwan explains how before Holi, when they asked for payment of dues, the teacher in charge asked a midday meal worker to sing and dance like a randi, made all kinds of obscene comments. And in Nawata, Lalita Devi explains that because the headmasters control and disperse payments, they can ask them to do all kinds of things, massage them with oil, kiss them, make performance for them. So basically what the workers put forward in explaining all of this is a kind of critique of a caste-based regime of gendered and sexualized labor. And I think we can also draw here on Dalit feminist interventions in the debates around sex work, where they explain that Dalit women are always already coercively constructed as sex workers. So just to move on to the experiences and strategies for organizing of the midday meal workers. The Rasoya Sangh was formed in 2015 after one of the midday meal workers actually reached out to a women's organization, ADRI, which is very active in Bihar and has a history of organizing around actual questions of gender violence. So what this meant was from the outset, although it was organizing workers, there was very much a focus on women's gender experiences as well as class identities. At the same time, this women's organization is linked to a left party, the CPIML, which has been at the forefront of rural labor movement, so those connections were very much there. And the main demands are related to increasing wages and security. And the key demand, of course, is for recognition as government employees and access to the rights associated with this. And also all of the questions around dignity relating to the kind of coercion which I've mentioned. And in putting forward these demands, the workers really invoke much broader questions around the valuing of lives, which is very much shaped again by the intersection of class, caste, and gender. So, one thing I feel is that this particular example, like many others, really shows up some of the limitations of the kind of dichotomy we see in a lot of the literature around new forms of organizing, which have come up in the context of neoliberal restructuring of labor markets and the rise of new forms of organizing among informal workers to kind of meet the demands of this new situation, and some of the questions which are being discussed, for example, during John Harris's lecture. So in this sort of approach, you have this kind of dichotomy between traditional trade unions and, supposedly new forms of organizing. So whereas trade unions located in workplaces, now you have struggles in communities, earlier employers were targeted, now it's the state. They moved from political parties to NGOs and from class identity to a whole range of other identities. And from rights as workers to rights as citizens, from redistribution to recognition. Now, I think that the midday meal workers example is really one of many which challenges this dichotomy and asks us to really look deeper. Because, for a start, as I've tried to show, the questions of redistribution and the questions of recognition are really very deeply bound up with each other in this and many other contexts. And so this idea of a shift from a focus on redistribution to a focus on recognition, dignity, and so on, and from class identities to other identities really is insufficient when the ways in which subordination and exploitation is maintained, as well as the ways in which workers resist them, continue to be shaped, I think, by the intersecting operations of class, caste, and gender in particular in this context. So finally, I'm just going to, finish with, in the words of Lalita from Navada district, who's one of the founder members of the organization. In a context where, there has been, it's an uphill struggle, some things have been achieved in the sense that there has been a very small increase in wages, but they're still very much fighting for recognition as government employees and for decent wages, basically. This is in the context of nationally a 35% cut in the scheme, and also demands for it to be shifted away from direct management by the state to management by NGOs, which these workers are very much opposed to. So she says the government has just consigned us to the flames, but we're here to fight. We're not going away. We'll go wherever we have to go, even up to Delhi, to win this battle and get our due. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kalpana. And now I would like to invite Toni Darbas to come and speak. She's a social scientist from the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization in Canberra, Australia. She has worked for the past 12 years there, and it's a National Research Institute of Australia. Her research is also interdisciplinary, and she is working on agrarian systems and the feminization of agriculture, primarily with agronomists. Toni.
That was a fantastic presentation. This one is a little bit more conservative in a sense. So I'm looking at scaling rural development interventions on the eastern Gangetic plains. I work on a project that works in 2 districts each of North West Bengal, Bihar, West Bengal, and the eastern Terai of Nepal. And I will draw an example today from Apne district of Bihar. This project is runs for 4 years, but has the potential for 2 more rounds of funding in a 12-year long program. Part of the 30% rule comes from that program, which is about Southern Asian, South Asia's river basin systems. It comes from our female foreign minister who insists that all Australian monies expended here will, 30% of which will benefit women and girls, which has opened up new frontiers of research and made my work much more exciting at CSIRO. Other than that, what you see is a fairly conventional agricultural project. These are the 4 objectives. None of those objectives explicitly refer to that 30% rule, but there is potential in the 3rd objective about creating an enabling environment for the adoption of these conservation and agriculture technologies, which I'll explain in the next slide, that I try to use in the project because I am responsible for institutional innovations. So my role in the project has been to ensure that institutional analysis has been benchmarked in each district, which pays attention to women farmers' situation and to set up innovation platforms to try and encourage intersectoral coordination to progress women's interests. So conservation agriculture is a technology that both male and women farmers, smallholder farmers of the Eastern Gangetic Plains value. It was devised in Australia. It's very big in Australia because it's an arid country. It's a lot about water use efficiency and improving the condition of soils. Australia has very poor soils in general. So I've distinguished between blue and pink. I'll go through these one by one. The aim is to introduce high yielding, shorter duration, heat tolerant varieties to fit more crops into a year despite climate change. The idea is to transition systems away of smallholders and smallholder systems that are currently characterised by widespread male outmigration from a traditional monsoon rice crop to continue cropping through the rabbi season, both to address the fact that food security is very poor amongst these households, often only 3 months a year of food grains produced, and to, and towards developing a surplus, and you know, I mean, I think there's a lot of romanticism amongst our Indian colleagues that perhaps you can reverse labour out migration by building the farming system up again into something profitable. To minimise tillage with zero policy factor attachments, so reduce ploughing. I have that in blue because only men plough, and that's a very significant point. Everything else women do. So the technologies are handy for women in that they can remove the task of transplanting rice seedlings by either using a mechanical transplanter or using direct seeding of rice. To leave as much crop residue in field as possible, given that women are also responsible for using it for fodder and fuel. But most excitingly for women, replace hand weeding with herbicides. They really like that. That's zero seed drill attachment. So instead of turning the soil, you punch a hole into the soil and put the seed straight into it. That with residue retention is what improves the condition of the soil. And so far no woman has touched one of those. That's an exclusively male technology. So the issue for me in this project is what approach to scaling are we using? Traditionally in agriculture there is a transfer of technology, linear version of scaling. So it's a context-free idea. It's based on economic ideas of context-free replication and expansion. It's a push approach where you count the number of beneficiaries without really distinguishing much between the small, large, male or female. It tends to be top-down, hierarchical modalities via the preferred Indian sectors, public extension programming, public extension services, and private value chains and markets. And the emphasis is placed on transferable packages, so business models, training modules, and amongst that, quotas for women, so they'll aim at a 30% quota. Adoption and diffusion of technologies is seen as a rational, spontaneous process by individual farmers. It's a gender-free notion, and gender roles are treated as a static farmer attribute. So in that way of viewing the problem, a male farmer and a female farmer are the same. There's no acknowledgement of the fact that she cannot play a field, that it's difficult for her to get credit, that her name is not on the land title. There are all sorts of problems women face that male farmers do not face. So I'm much more excited about systemic scaling, which is a much more complex and emergent paradigm that hasn't really taken root in the agricultural world as yet. So in that way, you see it as every intervention would be a contextualised and iterative experiment. So it wouldn't be one project, it would be 8 projects because each district has a different institutional arrangement. That it's a complex system that's characterised by interacting components, feedback, threshold effects and path dependencies. That we should be aiming to pull people towards the technologies, create enabling environments with diverse, innovative cross-sectoral modalities, and first of all acknowledge the point that there is no point producing more food unless you can sell it at a profit. That's pulling, not pushing with technology. So you look at social enterprise, cross-sector partnerships, franchises, spin-offs, and the way you view the community is not that it's spontaneous and rational. It's adoption and diffusion by very resource poor communities and households, and they require support, long-term support and hand-holding. And most importantly for me, there's no reason to assume that gender relations are static. In fact, gender relations are always evolving. It's just that it's incremental and not necessarily noticed unless we take the time to do so. So I've kind of cut that down into these possibilities. And by sector, I mean private, civic, or public sector. So I'd see agriculture as a domain, and there are 3 possible ways of organising action within that domain. So if you accept that there are gender roles, and you're only thinking that these sectors have each sector will have a different intervention strategy, you're in the top left-hand corner. Or you could accept that each sector will have its own strategy, that gender relations are changing and there could be new roles for women in agriculture. And it follows across the bottom. If you go for governance, and that there will be coordinated activity between different organisations from sectors that have different skills and knowledge bases, you could engage women via that strategy tailored to traditional roles, or you could use that strategy and encourage new roles and kind of become part of the evolution of gender relations. So both of these things operate in the project. It's a very large project. There are 22 partners. There's an NGO partner in every district. So there's plenty of scope for discussion, debate, and for trying out different things and considering what works better. In the gender mainstreaming approach, which is not under my domain but under the Economists, specifically from Curtin University in Australia, we've conducted separate focus group discussions for men and women for the on-farm trials that we're running before and after the monsoon and dry season. And it's fairly even, 60% men, 40% women. And the assumption is that you will get a different message because they undertake different roles in agriculture. But that simply doesn't show in the data at all. They give a common evaluation. The problem for them at this point, as we're trialling and vetting in the technology, is they're not getting timely access to the machinery, conservation, agricultural machinery and irrigation. The tractor drivers don't know how to use those seed drill machines yet. So you get poor germination, they might miss a whole corner of the paddock. They can't get timely access to suitable herbicides, so weed investigations are still a huge problem. But the women can see the potential to remove the drudgery of wooding. So they're still interested. And basically what they're excited about is less water, less seed, less herbicide, less labour, and improved soil with the same yields. So, and that logic went on. You use a 30% quota for women for everything. But you can see it just dies off as you get down to the more challenging activities for traditional gender roles. So by the time you get to technical training on how to use this machinery, it's coming right back down to 20%. And when I challenged collaborators in public sector collaborators in Nepal, they did that pretty hard. What is the point of training a woman to drive a tractor? She can't drive, women don't drive, and no tractor owner would hire her. Even though there were positive deviants there who were keen for the opportunity, not many, but they were there. So I'll contrast that to an example from the same project, which I would call systemic scaling, where our collaborators from Bihar Agricultural University really liked the capacity building and new ideas about agricultural innovation systems, innovation platforms, create a platform bring all the relevant organisations and people together, get them to resolve the problem together. And they've come up with this fantastic example, but it's largely because the only NGO we partner with that only works with women is JUBILEE, which is World Bank funded, and works through a women's self-help group methodology. So the women are organised into groups of 10 to 20 women and then federate at the village level and so on. So we're working with women only because we're working with JUBILEE. JUBILEE then went and approached the Bihar Agricultural University collaborators, and JUBILEE also approached TechnoServe, which is a Bill and Melinda Gates funded NGO that focuses on social marketing and also works exclusively with women. So together in that innovation platform, the ag extensionists, the NGOs, they introduced electronic weighing, and that should be moisture testers there, which overcame the endemic fuel problem. That they were being cheated of every quintal. They were losing 5 to 6 kilograms of grain because the middleman just rigs the scales in that manner. If the scales are electronic, you can't cheat. And it's the same with moisture testers. If you can prove that the grain is sufficiently dry and you can get high grade quality, they can't cheat. And they shifted the whole system in that, beginning to shift the whole system in the district indefinitely in that village. So the middlemen have also adopted this technology. So now no one can cheat. Secondly, they switched to electronic payment. Payment is immediate within a week rather than just before the next season, where you're desperate to buy inputs. And the profit goes back to the women as a small bonus payment. And by resolving the quality problem, by aggregating the produce at the village level, they are able to sell it on the Indian National Commodity Exchange either immediately or hold it until after the post-harvest flood. So they're able to make money, which is very exciting for them. And they have further plans that they will build a concrete floor so they don't have to drive their maize on the road, and that they will establish an input shop so that they can control, have they developed a memorandum of understanding with the Indian Cooperative Input Society, that I've got the name on at the moment, so that they will supply their own inputs, precisely the inputs they need at the right price, at the right time, so that you can get your crops and you really get them off, you really get another crop. And so even though when it comes to this point where the grain is on the truck going to the warehouse and the quality is being checked at the warehouse, or even at the village where they're drying the grain and checking the quality themselves, and you see them women, that grain belongs to them. And this is what they think about it. So our Bihar Agricultural University colleagues are excited with them. Like I've also seen our collaborators change their mind about them. So last slide, I would conclude from that gender mainstreaming is necessary. It's good. It gets public extension people and private value chain people in a habit of understanding where women are coming from. Gets women in a habit of going to training or to field days. But it's just not sufficient. It won't meet that 30% rule for that company. Partnering with NGOs is good overall, but if you want to reach a lot of women, or ensure you reach women, you need to work with a women-centric NGO. And that empowerment of women requires, this is smallholder women, poor women, whose husbands are absent, their sons are absent. Collective competence building methods. They need to enter into value chains. They need to get a stake in the system, a foot in the door, that they can start an input shop, that they can benefit from social marketing. They need freedom from bursary, from exploitative claims and credit, to be able to access institutional credit and swipe back assets, and that's when well-funded NGOs are. And most importantly, as Steve would say, it's important that they get a chance to invest in raw capital goods effectively, oil, tractors, conservation, agriculture, attachment. Because if the system does take off, you wouldn't want them to be locked out of the opportunities. If there's going to be rapid social and economic change, it's important that women get a chance to benefit as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Toni. That was really creative. And now I would like to ask Kazuki Minato to come and speak. He's a research fellow at the Institute of Development Economics in Japan, and he's written papers on Bihar's political economy. He's done study on comparative political economy and South Asian studies.
Thank you for the introduction, and I'm very privileged to be here, not only to be part of this international conference, but also to be the only male presenter of this session. Diversity matters. The title of my presentation is Gender, Identity, and Political Knowledge Implications from there are two main objectives. One is to present the extent of political knowledge of eligible voters in the context of Bihar. Here, political knowledge means awareness of politics and policies. And another objective of this study is to analyze sources of systematic variation in the extent of political knowledge across groups with different characteristics. In this study, we focus on differences in awareness by gender and identity, such as caste and religion. In this study, we use unique data from a sample survey that we conducted during 2010 Bihar certification. This is a postcode survey, which Professor Minato of the University is here, and I conducted with the help of ADRI in 4 assembly procedures. Sorry for the fine prints. 4 assembly procedures: Sivan, Tehara, Bodhgaya, and Madhepura.
What is?
Madhepura. So in this survey, we asked 10 questions to our respondents to measure their political awareness, political knowledge. Out of 10 questions, first 6 questions are related to politics, so we call them politics questions. And the remaining 4 questions related to major policies, so we call them policy questions. For example, the first politics question is, who is the Prime Minister of India? Only 30% of our respondents knew who the Prime Minister was, Prime Minister of India was. And the second question is Chief Minister of India, and third question is Deputy Chief Minister of India. Bihar. And other questions are about Chief Minister of UP, local MP, local MLA. So these are policy questions we asked in our survey. And the other, as for policy questions, we asked about Narega and 50% reservation for women in Panjab. As you may know, Bihar is a progressive state in terms of reservation for women. And another question is 20% reservation for EBCs. EBCs is lowest strata of OBCs. And the last question is about the Land Reforms Commission, which was set up by the Nitish Kumar government, which I think Chairperson Gupta talked about this issue a little bit in the previous session. So these are policy questions. And these questions seems very simple and straightforward for intelligent people like you, but this is not necessarily the case for our respondents. On average, out of the 10 questions, the respondents answered correctly only 3.33 questions. So about 1/3 of the 10 questions were answered correctly. And out of the 6 politics questions, 1.79 questions were answered correctly, and out of 4 policy questions, 1.54 questions were answered correctly. And so, by and large, the extent of political knowledge of our respondents was quite low. And moreover, majority of the respondents did not know about their own entitlements, including potential entitlements. For example, 65.5% of female respondents did not know about 50% reservation for women in Panjab institutions. Likewise, 67.4% of EBC respondents did not know about 20% reservation for EBCs in Panjab institutions. I want to talk about not reform issues, but due to time constraints, let me skip this.
4 minutes.
Really? So this is the, and also there is a huge wide gap in extent of political knowledge across groups with different characteristics. So this figure shows that there is a huge gap. So I mentioned these numbers just before. So this is for entire sample, the full sample. If you divide the full sample into male respondents and female respondents, there is a huge gap. And there is also a high correlation between caste, division hierarchy, and the extent of political knowledge for all sets of questions. And this is also true with education. There is high correlation between level of education and extent of political knowledge for all sets of questions. So next, I'd like to analyze sources of the systematic variation in political knowledge across different groups. So we learn OLS regressions of the following form. This is a very simple empirical exercise. This is not a rocket science. I don't have time. So this is this table shows the main findings of our empirical exercise. So let me summarize the results shown in this table. So there are three main findings. One, even after taking account of other factors, especially educational level, women were much less aware than men of politics and to a lesser extent of policy. So this is the first point. And the second point is all other factors being equal, different caste religion groups were almost equally aware of the major policies, which are more practical and relevant in real life. So this is the second finding. And the last finding is that this was not the case with the politics question. Conclusion and discussion. Our findings imply that a socio-political disposition to gender discrimination, as well as indirect channels like education, plays a major role in underlining the gender gap in political knowledge and presumably the lack of female autonomy in the political sphere. And finally, I'd like to add one more comment because I'm afraid some of you are very frustrated because you cannot drink alcohol in Bihar. And actually, I interacted with some local people, like journalists and scholars, and it is said that Birkbeck aims at electoral support from women, cutting across, castes, class, religion. Because Nitish Kumar does not have any, solid political base. So he wants to, create new political base, which accounts for half of the population. But given what I talked so far, whether this bold move will be successful or not crucially depends on women's awareness. That is my suggestion. So this is in January of this year, the state government organized human chain, the world's longest human chain, to express unity in support of prohibition. I think this is a masterstroke by Nitish Kumar to advertise and propagate about Birkbeck, which he tries to get support from. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kazuki, especially for ending with the human chain and that powerful image of women standing holding hands. The next presentation is by Pratishtha Singh, who has a very, very interesting career trajectory. She's a lecturer of Italian language and literature in Delhi University. She's an author and a poet. She is in the process of finishing a doctoral thesis on Mussolini in contemporary Italian literature. She's also the godmother of the Asolo Art Film Festival, and she has worked on the campaign for Muhammad Azharuddin in Savai Madhopur in Rajasthan. And in 2015, she traveled across Bihar during the assembly elections, asking women to vote. So it's a fitting continuation of your presentation, Kazuki.
Thank you for that introduction. Well, I really liked Kazuki's presentation, but I just wonder, when you did this survey on asking people who their prime minister is, did you conduct a similar survey, say, south of Bombay? Because I think that'd be interesting to know how many people there know who the prime minister and the president is. Well, I am essentially a lecturer, a consumer and a producer of literature. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, one of the reasons why I didn't get into a corporate job. The paper that I'll be presenting seeks to understand what brings about, a kind of social and political awareness, which, in my view, a lot of Bihari women possess. Of course, there are, in many ways, at least far beyond their city-dwelling counterparts. Now, women in Bihar have an interesting understanding of, at least, of what is amiss in the areas where they reside. They are aware of what's going wrong. I agree that they need to be sensitized and enlightened about how they can protest against it, or how they can ask for answers from the concerned authorities. But I have found in my travels, not just during the assembly elections in 2015, but since 2013, I have been going to one or the other district of Bihar on practically a monthly basis. And I have been talking a lot to women. I talk a lot. I have figured out that, they know, they are very aware of their village. They're very aware of when the water is available, when it is not. They're very aware of who it is in their village who is trying to exploit them and their men in one particular way or another way. They're very aware of their BPL cards, the status and all of that. So when I say social awareness, I'm talking about the awareness of the society in which they live. They might not know the word feminism, or how it's incorrect to say Eskimos now, or how the glaciers are melting, and that kind of social awareness I agree they don't have. But their sense of social awareness, I found, is more true to their surroundings, and it has helped them kind of monitor and almost master an interesting political move in 2015 Bihar elections, when the country was in the Modi wave, and how they decided to go with someone like Nitish Kumar, who was then standing along with someone like Rahul Gandhi and Darbas. While I was traveling across various districts of Bihar, when I talk about this, I'm talking from 2013 onwards. I must have traveled across, I don't know, more than 16, 17 districts of Bihar, and wondering how many of my IT professional friends back in Delhi, women friends, would know about how their colonies, their societies are shaped, and what they can do to change the sewer problem in their area. Or they don't, and I spoke to them quite a lot about this, even to my friends later on, and I found out that lots of them didn't even know which department takes care of the sewage of a city. I speak as someone who has tried to reach out to women, and to whom later women have reached out. They've spoken to me quite a lot, written to me, they call me, and I'm definitely not someone who works for an NGO or a social worker of that sort, because I just believe that each one of us has a social responsibility which we must execute. And social work essentially is the work which a government body should have been doing, and since they are not performing well enough, we have the need for these structures. Now, I would like to draw your attention to a very interesting survey. We have to, when one talks about women or any particular group in any part of the country or the world, one has to kind of talk about surveys. There has not much been written about this particular survey. It is the 2012 and 13 statistical profile on women labour, and it was conducted by the Labour Bureau of the Ministry of Labour and Employment of the Government of India, published in Chandigarh and Shimla. Now, this is an older survey compared to the other survey about which everyone really talks about, and I will later on talk about it. It's a 2014 survey, and a little later I'll talk about this. But first of all, let me talk about this particular survey in 2012. It shows a stark contrast between women workers in rural and urban centres of the various states of India. So what they've done is they've divided working essentially into three major categories, which is main workers. Main workers includes people who are working in jobs, 9-to-5 jobs. They can be government jobs, private jobs, whatever, and marginal jobs. Now, marginal jobs include agricultural jobs. They include labour forces. They include lots of other marginalized, so to say, professions. Now, it is so interesting to note that the survey says that in Bihar, out of a total of 19.1% of the female population which is working, the total workers, the rural centres have a 20% women workforce, and the urban has a 10.4% of women workforce. This is the total workers. In mainstream workers, the rural, while the rural workforce is 41%, the urban is 60%, because when we talk about mainstream workforce, it means that there's a fixed structure where this woman goes to work, so it has to be an office or a company of some sort, or a factory, which you obviously don't find very much in the rural centres. The interesting thing is the marginal workers, which are not taken into consideration sadly in later surveys, and the survey that I will talk about has not really taken this sector into consideration I think enough. In Bihar, rural women, 58% of rural women work in the marginal workers category, while in urban centres only a 32%. Now, what I'm trying to say is something very simple. It is that the ways in which an urban woman dreams of being emancipated is very different from the ways in which a rural woman is emancipated. And it is her kind of emancipation, and I think it's very interesting, and I think it's quite out there. Now, I think I'm speaking, and that's one of the reasons why I even decided to come and speak for this conference, apart from it being fabulously organized, is that I believe that the government here is attempting in some ways to remind women of the kind of strength that resides in them. Now, it has to be taken up on a much serious and on a much larger scale in some ways. The human chain, I really thought, was one of those things. In fact, he's absolutely right. When you go and you talk to women, they don't even know that there's a 50% reservation. But they do know that there are a few places where only women can contest for elections. So, which I think in their own ways is a sort of their understanding of a reservation. They don't know the word, they don't know that 50%, I don't think they know 50 or percent for that matter, but they do understand that there are a few places where men cannot really contest. So, it's going, okay. Alright, the concerns of this paper are twofold: women's financial condition and the social awareness. I won't talk about the 2014 survey, but when we talk about working women, we enthusiastically count the women labourers and consider ourselves done. Unfortunately, most of these surveys do not count women farmers, grocery store runners, community kitchen managers, beauty parlour owners, and many such small and even smaller occupations. These small professions keep up their keep up their lives running in so many ways. Now, before guns are jumped, I am not claiming that women's lives have transformed entirely and that they have become self-sufficient. Far from it, but I'm saying that a good start has been made. I'm talking also on the basis of my interactions with women, like I've been telling you about, and I did speak to them. They don't know that there's a 50% reservation, but they do know wherever in the nearest Zilla Panchayat or in Panchayat Samiti or in the Gram Panchayat there is a woman Mukhiya. They do know that, oh, in that particular village they have a woman. They don't know that it's because of the reservation, but they do know that there's a woman presence there. Now, I'm sorry, I would agree that most of these women who are contesting or who are sitting there in positions as mukhiyas are widows, wives, sisters, daughters of someone who could not contest because of the said reservation, but she still is a woman, and one expects her to be more sensitive. And when you go and talk to these women, you do realize that they are probably more sensitive to social reform, even though sometimes they are not able to conduct them just like they would want to do. Okay, time is really out. I just want to say the liquor ban, before everyone mocks it off, and every time I speak to someone in Bihar, they're like, haha, liquor ban, I'm not going to go there. I'm just saying, let's not mock it. There are people's lives here that have changed. Please go speak to them. You'll realize that they are breathing freer just because of this liquor ban in so many ways. And I can't mock it. And this is me as someone who drinks a lot, saying that I'm ready to sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratishtha, for a very passionate presentation. And now to Prashanti, who is managing the Gender Alliance in Bihar. She's from Jamia Millia University and has worked in various media houses before this.
Thank you everyone, thank you for the introduction. My topic is neoliberalism, casualty and gender casualty, and in quest of gender justice in Bihar. I would start little by briefing a little bit about neoliberalism. Everybody present here knows about it, but still I would talk a little about it. Capital constantly needs to expand itself, as Kalpana said, and this expansion of capital has resulted in expanding markets for its products and for market-driven economies and profit-oriented economies across the world. In every country, in some form or the other, we have been witnessing globalization, we have been witnessing neoliberalism, we have been witnessing all these changes with some structural adjustments. The socio-economic features, as everybody present here knows, of neoliberalism is definitely private property, free markets and free trade, and need for expansion of these markets, profit-oriented and profit-driven markets, economic policies and legislatures which has resulted in increase in global finance. This has also resulted in a change in the overall work and employment landscape, which includes new form of labor employment, for instance, home-based production, outsourcing and contracting, wage differentials. We all know about this. Also, there is a need to see neoliberalism with gender and the intersection of neoliberalism and gender. If we see at neoliberalism in terms, if anybody sees neoliberalism, we generally see it in terms of shift from institutional and structural biases, which were there against women in economic policies and other legislatures, to giving women more chances to explore themselves, to empower themselves in the entire economic development discourses. With gender no longer being sidelined at the periphery of various development discourses, with gender being seen as weapons in the fight against poverty and advancing development. However, when we peep a little closer into neoliberalism, it lays bare some of the major disjunctures which we need to look at. Women are seen largely as neoliberal subjects, as entrepreneurial subjects, and investing in them means investing in smart economies, thus increasing a lot of pressure on on them to prove their competitiveness, their skills, and their capabilities. On one hand, definitely neoliberalism has paved way for young women, or has paved way for some young women to become privileged subjects of social change. who are being able to maximize these new opportunities which is being given to them by opening access to labor markets and control over production, while on the other it has actually marginalized many to the new concept, to the new well-known periphery of the modernized market-driven sectors and economies. And it has also pushed many women to see casual laborers in sectors characterized by low wages and definitely productivity. It has generated employment for many, but for women, the employment generation has been marginally very low. It has led to empowerment, definitely, but with this empowerment, the traditional roles of women still remains intact. It has led to the idea of creating selfhood and imposing selfhood on women, but definitely with the primacy of competitive individuals, but definitely it has created a lot of pressure on them to prove themselves on every front and internalize the whole idea of competition. It has definitely created a demand for multi-skilled workers, but at the same time it has made them subjects of capacities. It has given them choices, but these choices are questionable as far as in context of India, and especially in context of Bihar, where there are such entrenched structural inequalities and unequal power dynamics. Talking about the socio-economic and political landscape, neoliberalism has came with a market-driven economy, increasing market integration, infusion, and a surge of technology. This may have had a different impact in the other states, but as far as Bihar is concerned, which is largely an agrarian state, it had a different impact altogether. With high employability, where traditionally women had a major role to play in the agricultural sector in Bihar, neoliberalism entailed a shift in inputs from human to technical with the onslaught of technology. Thus, in Bihar, where traditional women played a significant role in managing agricultural systems, their knowledge and inputs have been marginalized, shifting their roles in agricultural production from being primary producers to subsidiary workers. Mechanization, women traditionally had a predominant and significant role in transplanting, weeding, manufacturing, fertilizing, harnessing and threshing, activities like this. But mechanization of agricultural activities brought forth a gendered polarization of both work as well as wages in the sector. Women were replaced by many activities which were earlier performed by them, and thus relegating women to unpaid, invisible work or paid employment with low wages, much lower than the men. High literacy rate in the state and lack of policies and provisions for skills and development and training to adopt to the changing whole idea of changing production systems and the technology only added to the woes. Second important what Bihar has witnessed is the rise of right-wing nationalism, which has come with a propagation of ideologies of customary restrictions and cultural reservations, holding on to gender roles assigned to women in the garb of cultural preservations, holding on to the patriarchal construct of an ideal good woman as opposed to the modern, perceived women as the honor of the society, the clan, the state and the country and the religion, and thus her conformance to the set standards of morality and immorality, gender policing, policing of mobility, policing and thus access to opportunities, and policing of behavior. And another important aspect which this has, of course, patriarchy is there in the society, but besides this is perceiving her reproductive role as the most important role, where she is responsible for the patrilineal, she is solely responsible for the patrilineal succession, and thus a control over her choice, over her bodily integrity and her sexuality. This has overall relegated and the entire position and the status of women in terms of decision making, in terms of mobility, in terms of the condition of women, be it her health, be it her education, or the overall well-being. Some of the gender intricacies in Bihar which I would want to talk about is feminization. What it has led to is feminization and marginalization of labor. Definitely there is wage differentials between the men and the female. Literacy rate is just 53% as opposed to the male literacy rate, which is almost 73%. Education, women who are able to attain 10 years of education is just 22%. Child sex ratio is 933. Here I would like to talk that there has been a decline by 9 points from 944 in 2001 to 935 in 2011. And in urban areas where the decline has been much higher, it has been by 18%, and one could relate it to the onslaught of technology as well as the sun preference in our country and also in the state of Bihar. Literacy, child marriage is almost 40%, teenage pregnancy is again high, it's almost 12%, decision making is just 51%, spousal violence is high, it's 43%, and dowry deaths is the highest in the state, while female workforce participation rate is just 9%. So all these cross-cutting issues in Bihar has led to an exclusion of women from the productive employment, with female workforce participation being just 9%. In this graph, I just want to show you certain important mutually reinforcing things which is happening in our society, which has been happening in our society because of structural and cultural inequalities and the gender bias legislative policies. And this is an analysis of Census 2011 C2 table on marital status and sex in India. And this reveals 2.3% of girls are married under 18 in comparison to 2% in Bihar. Now don't get shocked because this is the 2011 census data. And I was talking about the earlier data, 40% child marriage, that is NHS data. 34% are married in the age group from 18 to 19 in India in comparison to 51% in Bihar. 58% of the girls are married in the age group from 19 to 21 years in comparison to 78% in Bihar. Now this is starting, we need to look about it and we need to talk about it because in India, the legal marriageable age for a girl is 18, while that of a female, that of a male is 21. So as soon as the girl reaches the so-called legal marriageable age, just after that, it shoots up to 51% in Bihar, and by the time a man or boy enters the legal marriageable age, that is 21, almost 78% of the girls in Bihar are married, most of them having 2 to 3 children, and many of them living separately or divorced because of migration in Bihar. An analysis of district information DICE in its national report card of 13-14 degrees, almost 19% drop in primary grade in Bihar in comparison to 10% drop in enrollment in the primary grade, 58% drop in enrollment in the upper primary in Bihar in comparison to 49% in the country, in the entire country. These two are again mutually reinforcing because it could be because of dowry, because of the patriarchal system, because of the structural inequalities, because of lack of decision making and the entire system which we are living in, because of lack of legislative policies and political will. Definitely there is a link between girls getting married after 18, drop in school enrollment, although there are no studies to prove that, but there could be a reinforcing link, and vice versa. Okay, I'll rush through. Some of the policies and legislatures which have been very gender biased and which needs to be looked on. I would not talk about each of them because I'm running short of time. One is Dowry Prohibition Act. The other is because this has led to a decline in child sex ratio because of the invent of technology and definitely some protests in India. Then Prohibition of Child Marriage Act in 2006. And this is one of the policies, free and compulsory education till 14 years. Why not till 18 years? I would just want to stress a little bit on the age of legally marriageable age of the girls, because by the time a boy reaches 21 and he has the and he definitely has the opportunities to, attain higher education, complete higher education, seek more employment opportunities, and work towards its own development. Again, I would reinforce that 78% of the girls in the state are married. So we really need to think about it and we really need to act about it. On behalf of Gender Alliance, there are 5 issues on which we are working. We are working on to bring forth, and we are advocating and to bring forth some of these legislative changes and reforms in the state. One of them is increasing the legally marriageable age for adolescent girls from 18 to 21. Thank you. I wanted to speak more, but since time is so short.
Thank you for sharing all this great data, and also the Gender Alliance is doing something about it. We don't have much time, but because we started 10 minutes late, hopefully the organizers will let us take questions for the next 20 minutes. Please keep your questions really short so that our panelists get a chance to answer them and more people can ask questions. I'll take 2 more questions. Yes.
My question is for Pratishtha, but she's not around, so.
She's just around outside.
Alright. Do you want to ask first?
Yes.
I have one question for Toni, which is that this project seems to implicitly assume that people don't know how to farm, and it seems kind of almost ironical for an agrarian country where like people have been farming for ages. So I was wondering why, for example, these kind of things are not done in countries like the UK, where the farming sector is given very heavy subsidies. Instead, why aren't they trained to farm more efficiently and reduce subsidies? Why are such kinds of experiments only geared towards more poorer countries in the Commonwealth? That's one. And I had another question for Kalpana, which is that, that kind of thing that you brought out very clearly, what's happened to midday meal workers. it seems to be a general trend in terms of how the state is mobilizing women's unpaid labor to really kind of deliver its developmental objectives, and which entails intensification of labor. So if you take ASHA workers, AMMs, the whole range of it, it's the same story. So, and also there have been significant mobilization by women's groups, etc. against this. How do you think this is kind of challenging this whole idea of women's emancipation being every woman turning into an entrepreneur in her little backyard? Thank you.
Yes, wait, you just bring the mic or yes, you are.
Hi, my question is for Pratishtha. When you said that how in the rural atmosphere the awareness level of women are way more than as compared to maybe the urban sector or whatever. But how much of this awareness and how much of this knowledge really converts into power and authority of decision making is my question. Because when I was traveling across UP before the elections, I went to Azamgarh, Mao and Barabanki, and I saw that women are really aware of the policies and everything that's happening around the government, but really they did not have the decision to take the charge of who to elect and who to vote and who's coming to power. So I'd really like you to comment on that.
Can each person introduce themselves when asking the question so that everybody in the room knows who you are?
I'm Surabhi from Center for Environment and Urban Development, Delhi.
My one question, I myself is Dr. Rajendra Bharati, Political Science Department, Kolhan University Chairperson. My one question is, we are talking about gender bias, but whenever we took the decision for women welfare, any act government, any legislation government makes, particularly in the period of new liberalization, always backfire. Because in private sectors, the entrepreneur, the producers, tries to get the women less because they have to pay more than welfare schemes such as the maternity leave, etc. That is one question we have to consider. And what's your observation on that? This is my question. In particular, place of India.
The last two questions here and here after you.
I'm Jeff Wood, and the best way to introduce myself is that I'm a privileged supervisor of somebody called Sarah White, who did some interesting work on Bangladesh, works in India now. Many years ago, she, in her work, asked what do women do, rather than what women do not have, or how women are constrained. And this was her way of critiquing the application of sort of Western feminist perspectives, really, to the lives of women in this part of the world. So it's for the whole panel, really, because it's a methodological question about how you really approach the kinds of issues. And I thought maybe there was only one person at the end who was approaching it slightly different from everybody else, but I enjoyed the data. Can I get this to you? There we go.
It's not question, it's drawing attention of Kalpana Wilson that regarding Assam, my sister had already spoken. For Jivika, others have spoken, probably speak. But there are educational motivators. There are AMMs in the hospital. And you will from Araria you will not be surprised to know that there are evocations in the agricultural sectors where young women have completely replaced men, like fisheries. We have some places I would like to mention Andhra, Thali, Jhanjharpur, women's NGO devoted to this fishery have completely replaced men, and some of the mafia men have been really put behind the bar because of them. Jivika, you have mentioned, I thank you. Jivika is routing revolution in Bihar. Now literacy, midday meal, everything is being supervised by them.
You have to come to your question.
Yes. I have to say only one thing, that one question only now, besides this observation, that regarding political awareness, age categorization, urban-rural categorization was there, but age and maturity level had not been mentioned by any of the orators. This much I have to say. In future, I will like to know from them somehow.
In your question.
Well, the last speaker has partially answered my question. My question is, can any of the panel list where women have gained in economic activities in rural areas in the last few years? I know of lots of examples in the board, and that's where one of the areas we're capitalising on, learning from, and helping those initiatives grow. Nobody, we had a project, none of the other speakers mentioned where women are gaining.
Thank you. I'm going to.
Thank you. I'm going to ask each panelist to answer for 3 minutes, so that they get a chance to answer comprehensively all the questions asked. So I'll start with Toni. So
So how does the CSIRO project see itself embedded in the broader region? In general, I think the consensus in the project is that we need, especially in India, and it's different for each country. In India, they are aiming to mainstream these conservation agricultural technologies, which is a lot about mechanisation, within the flagship national programs. So JUBILEE works within the National Rural Livelihoods Mission. There's bringing a green revolution or multicoloured revolution to Eastern India. There's a whole range of flagship programs where extension services will be available, and it's more a matter of matching the technology being used in those programs and sort of fine-tuning the system. In Bangladesh, where the public we have the Department of Agricultural Extension. I mean, in general, in both countries, there's a massive disproportion between an extension officer and the number of farmers they have to deal with regardless of gender. That's a major problem. So essentially, they will have to use a group-based methodology. They will need to collaborate with social mobilisation, NGOs, and try and connect the bulk of farmers to mainstream programs. It's about getting as much out of the resources available as possible. In terms of franchises, I looked at that off an NGO paper that I really liked that concerns scaling, but it is relevant in some of the innovations that have been formulated. So for example, in West Bengal, we're working in Malda and Kuchbehar districts. One farmers club, we work through farmers clubs, so we work through groups really, has come up with a system where because the farmers know nothing about zero-till, they've never grown maize before, that the farmer club will provide all services until the crop is standing in the field. Women are involved in that business model or franchise model. They go and door to door and explain what's available and if they would like to try it. The same with input shops. It's just coming up with a business model and that hopefully will scale that it will diffuse through networks of farmer organisations or public extension services. The question, I think the lady has gone now. Of course, I don't want to assume that people don't know how to farm. The information we get back from our collaborators, extension officers, public extension services, is that people have abandoned farming. It doesn't get them anywhere. The remittances are far more important in a household's economic situation than farming. It's just become kind of less and less relevant. And people themselves express to us that they want technology. Maybe it is cargo cult. I know that's a common criticism, that they are hungry for new techniques. Some of them were the general questions for the panel, but yeah, it's better to pass it on.
I just have one comment to make because somebody just questioned that there was no talk on age and maturity. I think the entire presentation and the graph was on that, and I would again want to reinforce one thing, that how we define age and how we define maturity is something we need to question. In a country like India, in a state like India, we have policies when it comes to voting rights. 18 is considered as major. But it's the same country where 18 is considered, 21 is considered for boys as major when it comes to marriage. Why not for voting then? And the other way you can see it, like when it comes to property transactions, again, a girl can get into it. A girl can get into it only when she is 21. So why is a girl considered 21 as matured enough for property transactions, but matured to take up the responsibilities of domestic responsibilities and the reproduction responsibilities and household responsibilities when it comes to marriage? What happens in these 3 years? Nobody looks at it. By the time a boy reaches the minimum marriage age, a girl is already in her home, maybe being abused. She might be suffering from marital rape, excluded from all the opportunities, excluded from entering into secondary schools, excluded from education, excluded from skill development, excluded from training, excluded from job. So I think, as you rightly mentioned, that we need to think about maturity and age, and also in the through Gender Alliance, we're also working on increasing the free and compulsory education from 14 to 18. Why just 14? Why not 18? Why not for higher education? Because definitely this education is again linked to dowry, because we live in a patriarchal society with a lot of structural inequalities. Definitely, this is linked to high marriage and child marriage. So these are some questions which we need to question ourselves, and maybe if we can question it here also, that would be really nice.
I thank you.
And also speak, because some of the questions were for the panel in general. One of the things which I noticed was not touched upon in the presentation of Gender Alliance was the whole issue of sex trafficking and prostitution of girls, which has increased in a huge way in India, but particularly in Bihar. And that data needs to be collected and presented. We're talking about child marriage, but child marriage often becomes a way of saving a girl from child prostitution. And I do not like to use the word child prostitution, because it's prostituting a child. The child isn't making a choice. And so that is something which we have to start collecting the data on. And I work in Araria, Purnia, Kishanganj, and in every village, in every panchayat, there are missing girls. So child protection mechanisms for the empowerment of girls, and it's linked to education, and especially if education can be made free till the age of 18, till high school, would help a lot. So yes, that would be something. In terms of age and maturity, Prashanti has already answered somewhat that, we have not talked about, this panel has not addressed the issue of age and maturity, precisely because there is a new generation growing up in Bihar, and that generation is extremely vulnerable. because of the fragile nature of social sector schemes. As you know, many of the social sector schemes are being closed down nationally. Money is drying up, and Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, for example, 50% budget cut. Midday meals, which of course I have someone who's an expert sitting next to me who talked about it. Midday meals, money is being cancelled. Bihar is not an island. We are connected to the rest of India, and that pressure, which is going to have an impact in the coming years of Bihar. And again, Prashanti spoke about, of course, religious fundamentalism. And you all have been reading in the papers about these anti-Romeo squads. Now, what does that mean? Can boys and girls not meet in parks? Do we have to stop flirting? So that's not the intention of gender empowerment. And so we have to think about what these conservative and neoliberal values which are tied to the idea of safeguarding us without empowering us is going to do in Bihar. Even as the story of women's participation in public places, prohibition, reduction in domestic violence as a result of that is unfolding in Bihar. And more education for girls, pink schools. I worked in a small strip in Forbesganj in Araria in a red light district of a nut tola. And that's a backward class community who are nomadic groups. But somebody spoke about economic changes, you were asking. And there have been economic changes in that community of women who were forced into prostitution, who've been able to exit out because they've linked to government livelihood programs and also been able to link to government anti-poverty programs. So there has been some linkage, some kind of getting of government identity papers, which has helped girls and women move out of systems and through livelihoods which are more dignified. This will take longer to document and present because all this is very recent, but this is happening.
Just to respond to Shaheen's question, in terms of the potential for unity between these different women working in these different schemes like Asha, Underpaid, and so on. I mean, I think it's definitely there, and in many contexts it is happening. For example, the photograph I showed of the rally, that's actually para teachers and the midday workers were also participating there and playing a role in it. So there is definitely a lot of linkages being made. And also beyond that, because for example, in the case of the midday meal workers, they are mainly, as I said, from rural labor households, agricultural labor households. And so there are linkages with those wider struggles as well. There are, of course, those differences as well, because, of course, Asha workers being generally from better off households because of the educational criteria and so on. And there are also, as I said, I mean, that question of sort of the lack of value which these women, mainly from Dalit households, being school kids feel, is sometimes expressed very much in relation, for example, to the women teachers, who they feel are much more valued, both financially and just on a human level. So it's both, in a sense, the contradictions and the potential for unity. In terms of Chirashi's question, yes, I mean, I think this is definitely, an alternative kind of form of agency, which is very different from the whole notion of the sort of industries and entrepreneurial subject, which is epitomized by microfinance. So yes, there's tremendous sort of potential here for collective agency. And in a way, these schemes do create the potential for new collectivities, even as they kind of try to deny them at the same time by saying that these are not workers, these are volunteers, this is an extension of domestic work almost. But in a way, that structurally does create a possibility for these new collectivities, and that's very important. And just very briefly, on Jeff's point about Sarah White's work, I mean, yes, there is that whole kind of post-colonial critique is very important, but I think as post-colonial feminists have since argued, it's also very important not to make invisible the fact that there are indigenous feminisms. So all feminism is not by definition Western. And I think that's really, really, really important to recognize, and I think that most of these women who, and I think the problem is that sometimes this argument about, those are Western feminist arguments,
have actually been used to say that what women want is not redistribution of power, all they want is respect. And that very much fits in with the kind of socially conservative and neoliberal arguments which we've been hearing about. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question about how being aware translates into any form of power. Now the answer can be like it has three important points. One is obviously the kind of power which we think comes from being elected or being an elected representative, or say being a bureaucrat or being higher up there in some power position. That is one kind of power which I agree with you in large part. It's there only in the appearance, if at all. It is not there. The second kind of power is the sort of a domestic social power, which I felt that women do have, rural women especially, because even if she won't probably come out and say it, she very well sometimes tells her husband to ask people to bugger off from the house. So I think that power, on some level, in some areas, is there. In many places, I agree that it might not be there. The third kind of power, I think, is very present and very there, which is the power to vote and to bring about a change with their vote. And I think the women in Bihar really proved this. And that power they have, and we just really need to keep on reminding them that they have that power, that they have to exercise that power. And I think that's where I'd stop for your question, because I just have 3 minutes. Jeff's interesting observation. I agree. I think the idea is to at least bring out the real picture. And not like, we seem to be still analyzing the rural Bihar situation or the rural India situation through a sort of a colonial black Venus lens. We still have that. It's almost, going back to that. So what I would want, at least, is for people to at least have a look at the current situation. I know whether it's good or bad or whatever, it's a secondary question, but at least figure that out. So essentially, the financial status is in many ways, at least on rural front, it is entirely divorced from her working status. A woman who goes out to work can come back home with nothing in her hand. Like they're not paid, or even if they're paid, the husband takes up the money or whatever. And women who don't work can also have some amount of financial ease in spending and being a spender. So what I'm trying to say is that women in Bihar, they have a different definition of development or vikas. We have been talking about that for quite some time, and I really believe that that definition which goes around, of the woman to go out in shopping malls and stuff like that, I hope that Vikas stays away from rural Bihar for as long as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Our panel comes to an end now. There is a 4:45 special lecture by Nitya Rao downstairs. So all of you are welcome to attend it, and I just want to add that listening to everybody here and the vibrancy, we could write a new book called The Republic of Hope, and I think Das would have been happy if he had been there, seeing all the changes that women are making and are going to make in India.